So we're continuing with Esther. And up to this point from last week, we learned, okay, this story takes place in Persia. And of course, the king was Persian, all right? And we learned last week that Queen Vashti was removed as queen for refusing to come to the king when called. And of course, the circumstances around that had to do with the king. The king would normally, any time he desired, have his queen come and hold on, just have his queen come and he would make them perform in front of people, do striptease and all this kind of stuff. And she refused. So she, of course, lost her crown. Some say she was executed, but that's not in the scripture. Anyway, so that's where we're at. The king is looking for a new queen, okay? And the thing to remember tonight is that Esther and her uncle Mordecai were Jews, okay? And they this was not made known to the king, and you'll see in the story tonight when some of it becomes known. Okay. So I think we'll do tonight what we did last week. And George will read one scripture, and then I'll read it. We'll just go back and forth. And remember, this is a story. So enjoy, but we're going to talk about some of the things that are happening as we go along. Okay, George, you want to start?
Okay. So when the king's commandment and his decree were heard, and when many virgins were gathered together in Shushan, the palace, in the custody of Haggai, the eunuch, that Esther was brought also to the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, the keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained favor of him, and he speedily gave heritage for purification, such things which were her portion, 7 maidens who were worthy to be given her from the king's house. And he preferred her and her maidens much more than all the other women.
Now, when the turn of each maiden was come to go in before King Achshavash, after she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women, for so were the days of their purification accomplished, every 6 days with oil of myrrh, and every 6 days with spices, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Then thus came every maiden before the king. Whatever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women to the king's house. In the evening, she went in, and in the morning she returned to the house of women, to the custody of Shangashashir, the king's eunuch, the keeper of the concubines. She did not come in to the king unless the king delighted in her, and she was called by name.
Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, came up to go in before the king, she asked for nothing but what Haggai, the king's eunuch, the keeper of the woman, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all those who saw her. So Esther entered before King Achshavash in his royal house in the 10th month. That is January in the 4th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther more than all the other women. She obtained grace and favor in the sight more than all other virgins, so that he set royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti.
Okay. And you notice these are out of order, but I pulled this out because this is at the heart of the story. Esther had not made known her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not make it known. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to learn how Esther did and what should become of her. Okay, so the situation here, we talked a little bit about it last week, is that there were many Jews in the Persian territories. All right, now the Persians were favorable toward the Jews in that they allowed the Jews to return to their homeland. Okay, because years before they had been taken captives and moved from Israel under the Babylonians. So, but though Persia did allow the Jews to return to Israel, many stayed, many did not go back. And so Mordecai and Esther were Jews that stayed, but they were just kind of mingled amongst everybody, and there really wasn't any problems. Okay, until you'll see, until a hater person comes along. All right, now let's talk about some of these things with Esther, because it plays it helps her and helps us understand the role that she plays as we go on with the story. So she did not come into the king unless the king delighted in her, and she was called by name. So this is important to remember, because no one, not even a queen, could get in to see the king unless called by the king. And the threat was the penalty of death, who tried to get to see the king without being called. And this will play a significant role. Okay. And you notice it said, let's just go back to where it said about the purification right here. Okay. There had to be a purification of the women for 12 months. Okay. And here it says and mentions that they would do every 6 days with oil of myrrh, and every 6 days with spices, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Now, I don't want to get too graphic here, but it is here, and so, all right. So purification. Now we have to remember this was Persia, not the Jewish religion. Okay, but similar. Okay, very similar. So yes, and if you read commentaries, especially from authorities and from our culture and whatnot, and they'll say, "Oh yes, to purify her, the beauty and and then there's comments like, oh wow, those spa treatments must have been really cool." Well, I mean, that wasn't purification, there were laws about purification. Okay. And some of these things, and it's kind of what they said in other things for purification. Now, they had, as do the Jews, even to this day, strict laws concerning the menstrual cycle of women. Okay, so it, even though, you know, it doesn't elaborate, women, when they had their menstrual cycle, their period, they had to be purified for, I'm going to say 3 to 7 days because they don't have the exact number. Okay, and in the Jewish laws and the Jewish faith, they would go enter into a mikvah, which is the same thing as kind of like a hot tub now. Okay, but they would have to be cleansed, and then of course the Jewish women would have to offer sacrifices and whatnot, and it all was related to the uncleanness of blood. Okay, and so I don't want to linger on that, but you also noticed that the women entered the king's house at night, and they returned to the women's house in the morning. So the concern about menstrual purity and other things in that kind of area were certainly what they're talking about here. So, okay. And then, so we get to Esther and her inner depth and her she was beautiful, or she could not have been chosen to go there. So she was beautiful physically, okay. But notice when she went in, all right. The other women, of course, more than like they asked for whatever, all kinds of luxuries and stuff like that. That was okay. But Esther asked for nothing. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all those who saw her. She was a very unique person. And we have to remember here, all right, she was an orphan. Her mother and her father had died, more than likely were killed. All right, and she was raised by her uncle, Mordecai. So she had been through a lot. And but she was genuine, and people loved her. I think we all probably know some people like that. So it was it was the beauty of who she was, not just what she looked like. It was her whole being. She was refreshingly honest, graceful, and not self-seeking in all she did. And certainly that will become evident. And most importantly, she was a woman of God, and his scent, this is a quote, and I don't have the name of it. This was a quote from someone on the internet. And his scent, they're talked about the odors of the herbs and all that kind of stuff. And his scent was on her and dwelled everywhere she went. This is this is kind of what Jesus was talking about. And so, but we will go on. Now, another interesting, just an interesting thing here. And I had never read this proverb, but it might be of interest to you because I did read the whole thing, and you know, there was not a whole lot of positiveness surrounding women, and we talked about the status of women wasn't good, but this proverb was really pretty good. And so I took this line from it, and I have both Lancet and KJV for a reason. So this proverb, it says, comeliness is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who reverences the Lord shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gate. Now, I just thought I would bring this up because this is throughout the Bible, and it's related to one of the concepts that we teach. Notice that the Lancet Bible says a woman who reverences the Lord. The King James talks about a woman who fears the Lord. And the difference in these two words can really make out the concept that well, it's really what Jesus taught, but we reverence the Lord, and we don't fear the Lord because we have learned that God is love. Okay. And God doesn't punish, nor does he reward, but fearing God is totally different than reverencing God, I think. So I wanted to bring that up. Okay.
In those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, of those who kept the door, were wroth, sought to lay hands on King Achshavash. And the thing became known to Mordecai, who told it to Esther the queen, and Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. And when the matter was investigated and found to be so, they were both nailed on crosses, and it was written in the book of Chronicles before the king.
Okay. Now, so Esther is the king now, and Mordecai, I think he might have actually worked for the palace somehow. But anyway, and the point here, you know, the Bible, they'll say things, but you don't get a lot of the details, because normally Esther, as the queen and whatever, was inside the palace, and she didn't talk to anybody on the outside. But how she did it, and you'll see in the story coming up, is that she could send one of her eunuchs, okay, that was in charge with her, to go talk to Mordecai, and that's how they went back and forth. And so this, in this instance, becomes important later because Mordecai, when Esther told the king through the eunuch, whatever, she told him that it was Mordecai that came upon this, and so Mordecai was given credit. Now, once again, the king didn't know at this point that Mordecai or Esther were Jewish. Okay. And then when we get to, it says they were both nailed on crosses, and it They were both nailed on crosses, and it was written in the book of Chronicles. Okay, this doesn't mean that it was in the Chronicles of the Bible. Okay. Let me pause for just one moment. Okay. So it just meant that they kept, it was like a journal, and they kept track of all of the significant happenings in the kingdom. And again, I just put this in here as a difference from the King James, and this it occurs several times where the King James talks about them being hanged on a tree, but here the Persians crucified people, just like Israel did. So that's just a point here to bring up. All right, so this is kind of like, this is the end of chapter 2, and so we move on to a new part of the story. Okay, Haman and Mordecai.
After these things, King Aksharosh promoted Haman, the son of Hamadatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and did obeisance to Haman. For the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow nor pay him reverence. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's commandment?"
Now it came to pass, when they spoke daily to him and talking about Mordecai, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman to know whether Mordecai's words were the truth. For he had told them that he was a Jew. Mordecai told the servants that he was a Jew. And so Haman was not a nice man. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down nor do him obeisance, then Haman was full of wrath against Mordecai. So why did Mordecai not bow down to Haman? Mordecai was requested not only to salute the pagan prime minister, Haman, but also to worship him. This is why Mordecai refused to obey the command. Being a Jew, a worshiper of the only true God, Mordecai would not acquiesce to Haman's request or accept the counsel of his fellow officials and servants. So you can tell that we're going to have some problems here.
And he thought it nothing to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had revealed to him the people of Mordecai, whereof Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Aksharosh, even the people of Mordecai. And the first month, that is, the month in the 12th year of King Aksharosh, they cast lots before Haman from day to day and from month to month. Then in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, Haman said to King Achshavash, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of King Achshavash, and the laws are different from those of all other people, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, the king ought not to spare them.
If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will weigh 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those who have charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the silver is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you.
Then the king's scribe was called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded to the king's commanders and to the governors that were over every province and to the princes of every people of every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people according to their language. In the name of King Achshavash, it was written and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, and even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take their wealth for a prey. In the same day, on the 13th day of the month of Adar, they were written.
The copy of the writing was given in every province, commanding all the people to be ready for that day. The couriers went out, being hastened by the king's command, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city of Shushan was in an uproar. Okay, so we have the scene set for next week. And next week, we will see what Esther does to save the Jews. Okay? Now, since we study the spirit of the word, so to speak, I mean, this is a great story just by itself, and when Esther becomes a hero and whatnot. But we like to study more the spiritual aspects of it. So here is our well, we very much appreciate your contributions. Okay. So here's our little question for tonight. Do you think Vashti being removed as queen and Esther being crowned as queen was coincidence or part of a divine plan?